What are you really getting when you buy an NFT? If you answered ownership of the artwork, think again. Because according to a recent report, that might not really be the case. In fact, most claims by NFT projects are actually misleading and confusing. In today's video, we'll be going over copyright licensing and how it applies to NFTs and the red flags you need to spot when it comes to projects that claim you own intellectual property. This is a video all NFT investors cannot afford to miss. Now, before we go any further, folks, let's remind ourselves of the usual small print. None of what follows is financial or indeed legal advice, because I am not a financial advisor and I sure as heck ain't a lawyer either. So make sure you consult the real thing if you need that sort of guidance. Also, if you found this video useful, please send it to a friend and do all the usual liking and subscribing and all that jazz, because you know how happy it makes me. And now, back to our scheduled program. Now, there's one fundamental concept, or rather difference, that I'd like to drive home before we really begin. And that is, ownership of an NFT does not translate into ownership of the underlying art. If that were really the case, I would have minted quite a number of Rembrandts for myself, and I reckon you would too. So, to put it simply, NFTs are nothing but digital representations or copies on the blockchain containing a link directing to or pointing to the location of the underlying asset or artwork. This means that, contrary to popular belief, you don't actually own the artwork of your favorite NFT holdings, nor are you freely able to use the underlying artwork in your NFTs. Now, if you'd like a real-life illustration of the consequences of this fallacy, look no further than SpiceDAO and its infamous $2.7 million purchase of the Dune Bible, a rare storyboard collection by Alejandro Jodorowsky. Post-purchase, SpiceDAO tweeted its plans to adapt the book into an animated series, which many speculated were made under the presumption of having acquired the copyright when purchasing the copy of the book. Now, that couldn't have been further from the truth. Though, to be fair, SpiceDAO did contest these claims, saying they were well aware they did not possess the copyright. With the disbanding of the DAO a few months later, after failing to acquire the rights from the relevant parties, I must say I can't help but wonder if they were indeed aware of the fallacy as they claim. It's safe to say, if true, that it was quite an expensive assumption to make. Now, that, I hope, puts things into a bit of perspective. Now, keep in mind that if you wanted to actually own the underlying artwork of an NFT, you would need to enter into a legal agreement with the NFT issuer, provided, of course, they themselves have rights to the images the NFTs claim to represent. And since it's impossible to physically enter into an agreement with each and every NFT holder, projects tend to express their intended transfer or licensing of rights in the Terms of Service section of their websites. Now, I'd suggest you take a quick peek at this section on the website of the NFTs you purchased or are planning to. Some of you who just tried that might have realized that some projects don't even have one. Well, I hate to break it to you, but that is definitely not a good sign. And those of you who were able to find one might have noticed something along the lines of, quote, permissions being granted for your use of images, either commercially or non-commercially. I'm looking at you, Bored Ape Yacht Club holders. This grant of permissions is what those in the legal world call licensing. Now, there are various licensing structures that NFT projects can undertake, from allowing the NFT holder to use the artwork solely for personal use to using the artwork commercially in the production of featured merchandise, for instance. The exact specifics are expressly listed in the project's Terms of Service, so don't forget to read them before you blindly start making t-shirts featuring sick artwork from your favorite NFT holdings. Unless you want to risk the possibility of getting sued, of course. Now, before I begin breaking down the different licensing structures, let's understand a bit more about the legal rights which allow NFT projects to issue these licenses, shall we? All right, let's begin by acknowledging the sheer variety of use cases for NFTs. NFTs are no longer just representations of JPEGs or digital artworks. They've expanded beyond that to represent a variety of interests or privileges granted to the holder of the NFT. This includes representation of eligibility for special privileges in or right of admission to events, access to exclusive content in digital applications such as games and social platforms, ownership interests in physical property, redemption interests in physical products, interests or claims over intellectual property, etc., etc. The list goes on. Now, I've covered all of these different use cases in a separate video which I'll leave linked for you in the description. But in this video, we'll be focusing on intellectual property rights and their application to NFTs, and specifically NFTs that represent some form of artistic creation or authorship. So, what's the global position on how to treat NFTs and the underlying intellectual property they represent? Well, according to a recent article published by the World Intellectual Property Organization, or WIPO, link below, the best approach in the current regulatory landscape is to apply the existing intellectual property laws for artistic creations such as the Berne Convention for the Protection of Literary and Artistic Work and the WIPO Copyright Treaty to the underlying asset or creation the NFT represents. And what this approach does is create two distinctive ownership rights, one over the NFT itself and the other over the intellectual property of the underlying artistic creation. This makes the NFT a sort of vehicle that allows the holder to enjoy certain rights of usage that have been expressly conferred by the creator of the NFT artwork. So, to give a more relatable example, you can think of the underlying artistic work as a story penned by an author and the NFT as the book in which said story is printed. So, running with that example, existing copyright laws allow authors to publish their story by making printed copies of it in books that, when purchased, provide purchasers with the right to read and use that book in their personal capacity, while at the same time barring book holders from making further copies to sell to others. Now, similarly, when applied to NFTs, this allows creators and projects to retain IP rights while selling NFTs of their artistic works. And I must admit that this is a rather smart approach for two reasons. The first is that it gives creators the autonomy to decide the extent of the IP rights they wish to grant NFT holders. And the second is that this model is more befitting when considering that the underlying artworks aren't an immutable part of the NFT, as most NFTs don't actually store the artwork on-chain. Okay, so this approach seems pretty straightforward, right? Wrong. Allow me to explain. The approach we just discussed gives rise to two primary causes of concern when it comes to NFT licensing. The first of which is the seemingly unchecked power held by NFT creators to change the terms of the licensing at will, while the second is the misleading and contradicting use of words or statements made by projects due to the lack of a specialized regulatory framework for NFT licensing. In fact, a recent report from Galaxy Digital, which you can find linked to below in the description, clearly highlights the problems I just mentioned by taking the case study of 3 popular NFT projects in the space. So, let's take a deeper look at them, shall we? The first project, or rather entity, that the report looks at is Yuga Labs, the company behind the popular Bored Ape Yacht Club NFT project. The authors of the report use Yuga Labs to highlight the confusion and ambiguity created by misleading and contradictory statements often made by projects on their marketing and licensing pages. Specifically, the report does this by comparing the phrasing used by Yuga Labs in its licensing page for BAYC with the phrasing of terms used in the licensing pages of its recently acquired CryptoPunks and Meebits NFT projects. So, let's take a look at the language employed in the Terms and Conditions page of the Bored Ape Yacht Club. The first clause of the page reads, quote, "You own the NFT. Each Bored Ape is an NFT on the Ethereum blockchain. When you purchase an NFT, you own the underlying Bored Ape, the art, completely." Now, I don't know about you, but to me, the use of the words owning the underlying art completely makes it sound like Yuga Labs just gave the buyer ownership over the artwork, as well as the associated copyrights attached to it. But to get to the truth, all you need to do is read the next couple of clauses that grant the NFT holder with licenses to use the artwork for personal and commercial gain. That doesn't exactly sound like complete ownership, does it? Rather, it seems like Yuga Labs is still the copyright holder and that the first clause was just for show. Now, when I first noticed this contradiction, I brushed it off as a simple case of a difference in interpretation. That was until the authors of the report highlighted the phrasing used by Yuga Labs in its new licensing terms for the CryptoPunks and Vids projects. The licensing terms for both these projects were distinctively more professional and acknowledged a division in the ownership of the NFT versus the ownership of the IP rights associated with the artwork. If Yuga Labs is indeed mindful of this distinction, it begs the question, why does BAYC still employ such misleading phrasing in its licensing terms? My guess is as good as yours, but if there's one thing I'm certain of, it's that when it comes to legal rights, less ambiguity is always better. A clear and fluent expression of the terms would save everyone involved a lot of time, as well as a lot of money in potential litigation. Now, personally, I'd rather not spend millions of dollars on a lawsuit debating the extent of rights conferred due to ambiguous language in the licensing agreement, but hey, maybe that's just me. However, confusion arising from misleading phrasing isn't the only problem NFT holders face. I'd argue that the unilateral power to change the terms of the licensing possessed by NFT projects is a far greater threat. This is especially harmful to NFT purchasers and holders as it puts them at the mercy of NFT project managers. If you think about it, centralized control is the one thing you don't want to see in supposedly decentralized economies. But more often than not, the management of NFT projects is often placed completely in the hands of centralized teams. So this brings us to the second case study in the Galaxy Digital report, which happens to be the Moonbirds project by the Proof Collective. Now, Moonbirds is an excellent example of a project that faced a lot of criticism from the community due to its unilateral action in changing the terms of licensing post-sale. The team had in fact promised users that they would own the IP, as evidenced by this picture right here. But, like I said, you need to read the terms of service, folks, because Moonbirds NFT holders who didn't were rudely awakened by a tweet from project founder Kevin Rose to find out that they did not, in fact, own the IP. Almost overnight, the team behind the project decided to change the licensing structure to CC0 licensing. Now, while I'll be getting into this in more detail later on in the video, all you need to understand for now is that this move effectively pushed the artworks into the public domain, making them freely usable by anybody. This meant that holders who were preparing to use the artworks commercially were now left stranded. One Moonbird holder even stated that a brand pulled out of a proposed licensing deal due to the announcement of the CC0 licensing, which gave the brand the option to use the artwork without owning any NFT or paying the NFT holder. Now, at this point, things seem rather bleak for NFT licensing, don't they? Well, keep your chin up, as some projects actually do attempt to bestow ownership of IP rights on holders. This brings us to the report's third case study, which was the World of Women NFT project. Now, World of Women attempted to transfer copyright ownership to holders through a novel copyright assignment agreement, which created a governance structure that allowed the copyright of each World of Women NFT to, quote, run with the NFT. However, according to the report, the problem with this structure was the lack of clarity in relation to whether the IP assignment agreement continues to govern downstream sales to secondary purchasers. Since secondary purchasers do not expressly enter into a legal agreement merely by purchasing the NFT, it created questions about the legal sustainability of the licensing model in the secondary trading market. This problem was compounded by the fact that most NFT marketplaces like OpenSea neither display nor have any functionality to facilitate the execution of such an assignment agreement. So, now that we've taken a dive into the problems with NFT licensing, let's look at the different types of licenses that projects can provide holders with. Broadly speaking, NFT licenses can be split into 4 types. The first one is the most common, known as a personal use license. Holders of this license are typically allowed to use and display the underlying artwork of their NFT in a non-commercial, personal capacity. They are barred from monetizing the artworks in any way. Some of the most popular NFT projects that only issue personal use licenses are Gary Vaynerchuk's VFriends, NBA Top Shots NFTs, Timepieces, and Adidas Originals. The second is the commercial license. As the name implies, this license allows NFT holders to use the underlying artistic work for commercial purposes. Projects that issue this license allow their holders to monetize the artwork through various forms, such as creating an animated TV show featuring the NFTs, or even creating a trippy music video with a fellow brother in token. One of the most popular NFT projects that issue commercial licenses, if you haven't already guessed, is the Bored Ape Yacht Club. Now, the third license type on the list is the limited commercial license. These licenses are similar to commercial licenses with one key difference, which is, of course, limits on monetization formats or durations. Some of the popular NFT projects which issue this license are Doodles and CryptoKitties. Both projects place a limit of $100,000 in monetizable revenue for their NFT holders. Now, the fourth and final license type on the list is called the Creative Commons license. I must say, this type differs quite significantly from the ones we've discussed before. This is because once a project undertakes this licensing type, there is no going back. Creative Commons licenses, or CC0s for short, are unconditional and irrevocable license types that involve the copyright holder waiving all claim to the intellectual property by effectively dedicating said IP to the public domain. If you remember what we discussed before when talking about the Moonbirds project, you'd understand now why the team's decision to switch the project to CC0 was met with such resistance. However, it's important to note that Moonbirds is not the only project to undertake CC0 licensing. In fact, several prominent NFT projects such as the Nouns, Cryptodes, Emphas, and Goblin Town use CC0. Now, it is important to remember, these types are just broad categorizations of existing licensing types, and most projects may use a combination or variation of these licensing types. Now, interestingly, just a couple of weeks ago, well-known Silicon Valley venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz came out with a set of 6 standardized NFT licenses based on the Creative Commons framework. The firm called them Can't Be Evil NFT licenses and released them publicly for free. If you haven't caught on, that's a play on Google's now dropped Don't Be Evil slogan from way back when. According to the accompanying blog post, the licenses were created to, quote, 1. Help NFT creators protect or release their intellectual property, IP, rights. 2. To grant NFT holders a baseline of rights that are irrevocable, enforceable, and easy to understand. And 3. To help creators, holders, and their communities unleash the creative and economic potential of their projects with a clear understanding of the IP framework in which they can work. Similar to the Creative Commons license, the Can't Be Evil licenses are irrevocable, save for 2 which allow the issuer to terminate the license of the holder when they indulge in hate speech. The 6 licenses provide varying combinations of rights across 5 categories, namely copy, display and distribute, hate speech revocation, commercial use, modify and adapt, and sublicense. The licenses are freely available as smart contracts on the A16Z crypto GitHub, which I will leave a link to below. Now, on paper, the A16Z licenses seem to solve both the problems we discussed earlier in this video. The ready-to-implement format of the Can't Be Evil licenses will help in removing ambiguous licensing language across the space, whereas the irrevocable nature of the licenses will provide greater confidence to investors who decide to invest in projects that implement these licensing standards. However, Only time will tell if the Can't Be Evil licenses reach mass adoption among NFT projects and if there are any potential problems in their implementation. So, until then, that's all we have for today on NFTs and IP rights. Hopefully, I've managed to leave you a bit wiser than you were 20 or so minutes ago. If I've missed out anything you'd have loved to see me cover in today's video, please let me know in the comments below. Do you think NFTs need specialized intellectual property regulations, or do you happen to perhaps agree with the current approach of applying existing regulations? What are your thoughts on A16Z's Can't Be Evil licenses? Meanwhile, if you enjoyed today's video, do drop a like and subscribe to the channel for other videos like this one. And don't forget to hit that bell, it'll help us bring top quality content to your doorstep, so to speak. You can also find links to all the other places that you can follow me apart from YouTube in the description below. These include my Telegram, Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. And if you're itching to know about what videos are coming next, I recommend you subscribe to my weekly email newsletter, which also contains market updates and a breakdown of my personal portfolio. Also, if you're looking for some of the best discounts and promos in the space, then do touch base with my deals page, discounts that only viewers of this channel get to take. So, all of which you shall seek is there at the tippy top of that description box. That's it for today, my fellow crypto fans. Thanks as ever for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Till then, stay cool, stay safe, and stay crypto.